Well, what's your favorite monster?
Galadron!
No, I meant large monster.
Galadron is very big, huge.
Okay, well, how about a monster that is at least bigger than a Galadron?
Extra large Galadron?
Why do I even bother talking to you?
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages,
Now that we've had the final title update for Monster Hunter Wilds, I'm pretty sure we're not gonna get any proper new monsters added to the game until the eventual expected expansion happens. And with us now having a full 34 different separate monsters in this game, I thought that made this a pretty perfect time to rank them all based on my personal preferences for a combination of my feelings on their aesthetics, their fight, their personality, and design in general as a whole. For some of them, I am pretty decent at putting my thoughts into words here, but for others, it's just more of like a vibe thing. You may not agree with my list or my ranking, and I expect it to be very rare that there's anyone who would fully agree with every single one, and I'd love to hear you guys make a case in the comments for any of the monsters that you think I have underrated here for sure. But this is all in good fun. It's just my own thoughts on each monster in Wilds. We'll go in progression order just because I find that to be a fun way to structure these tier lists rather than just going like one tier at a time from the bottom up, and it heads up that the tiers are ranked independently, by which I mean that I consider the D tier monsters to be a decent margin worse than the C tier monsters, but I'm not trying to rank the monsters within the D tier against each other. And also, of course, this is all just comparison to each other. I don't think any monster in any Monster Hunter game is D tier in the grand scheme of like creature game design, but I have 7 tiers here because that's what makes sense for splitting them up in my mind, and so this is how it's all laid out visually. It said the first monster that you fight in the game is Chotacabra, and I have him in the S+ tier. I love him, and I know that a lot of people are probably raising their eyebrow right now, but to me, challenge isn't the biggest impact on whether I like the monster or not by any means. The biggest factor is their personality, and Chotacabra has an immensely large personality. He's silly, he's wacky, and he's a little bit icky too with his big sticky tongue, and I think he's my favorite introductory monster in the entire series of Monster Hunter, and they gave him a visible butthole as well, which is not something that many monsters can claim to have. So he's silly, he's funny, his fight is enjoyable, more so than most starters, and for me, I just think that he's a near perfect monster for what he's trying to be. Next up is Quematrice, who I have in the bottom tier, which is the D tier. I don't think Quematrice is a bad monster or anything like that overall, but I just think he's a little bit lackluster compared to most of the roster. Chicken that can create fire with his tail is a neat idea on the surface. I like the sort of texture of his tail and stuff like that too, and I do think that he looks sort of fun, but mechanically and as far as his moveset, I've said it since launch, he just feels like someone wanted to make Glavenus again, but as an early game monster, and with comparisons to actual Glavenus, as someone who has fought it many times, it just sort of makes Quematrice not feel that special. After that, Lala Barina, who is in the B tier for me. I think she's a decent step up from the monsters that I least like in the game, but she's just a little bit tame. Her animations are very fun and floaty, and I like how fuzzy she actually looks. I honestly enjoyed everything about the actual fight. Even the paralysis doesn't feel bullshit to me because it's very predefined. It's attached to attacks that generally have very long telegraphs on them. Overall, I think her design is pretty awesome. I love her visuals, I love her personality and just the way she moves in general. I love her fight, but I just love the whole package of her a bit less than all of the monsters I have in tiers above her. And I think that's partially because my favorite Temnoceran will probably forever be Ragnakedaki, and that's one hell of a comparison to try to live up to, even if I don't think there's anything actively negative about the monster. Moving on, next monster you encounter in the story is Congalala, who I have in the S++ tier, and this is just a big personal thing right here for me that I don't expect anyone at all to agree with, but it's how I feel. I love the big pink monkey, and I felt a weird connection with him since I first fought him back in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate when I was first learning the wide variety of monsters that were available in this series in the games that, weren't Monster Hunter World, which was mostly fanged wyverns and flying wyverns. I felt attached to Congalala from that first moment, and he didn't return for the entire 5th generation, but he finally has returned in Wilds, and what a glorious return he has had. His fight is just full on improvements all across the board, and he looks so glorious now that even his fart clouds are impressively high definition, and even the woodwoods consider his fur to be like a very big, luxurious valuable. He's just very clearly top tier for me on a personal level. Next up is Balahara, who brings us back to the D tier at the bottom. This is one that I have never really been able to put into words because I think in theory I should like him. He's a bit funky, his face is a bit weird, his mouth is a bit weird, and the way that he burrows in a spiral like an actual drill is quite interesting, but just something about him just gives me weird vibes. I think he's interesting, but he doesn't tickle the specific parts of my brain that are required for me to like a monster's design. He just doesn't feel very monstery, I guess, and his fight I think is not the most memorable in the game either. Up one tier from that, in the C tier, I have Deshagama. I think he's neat, but just not the type of thing I find myself overly attached to. I like bear monsters, and I was pleasantly surprised by his fight compared to my expectations, as he was one of the only monsters that I was at all aware of before playing the game, as he was in the initial reveal trailer, and he looked like he'd be a really early monster, but he's more sort of like early mid-game, but he's just sort of like the vanilla monster of Wilds. He's the most bland in my opinion. He is a quality creature overall, and I still think that he's neat compared to like other monsters in other games, but his visual design isn't overly exciting compared to the Wilds roster. His fight isn't particularly intense, and there's no attacks or moments that make me go, whoa, this is awesome, or anything like that, and everything that I have above him is just a monster that I think is better. After him, we have Duna, who I've got in the S tier. Duna, I've always liked a pretty reasonable amount, but she's grown on me even more over time. Her fight is the slowest of the Apex monsters. I think it's even slower than dahaad, or at least it's more predictable than him, if not literally slower, and over time she has just become one of the monsters that I find to be the most satisfying to hunt in this game. Her design is lovely. She's just a big old fishy lady with a veil made of water, and is very cool, especially with her control of water being represented by the veil and by the waves she creates with the size of her body. It's like instead of being a water monster by shooting water out of her body, like most of them, she's a water monster because she uses the water around her as a weapon. She takes what's there and uses it to her advantage, and I love monsters that do that type of thing. Next up is Rompopolo, the mosquito-y looking brute wyvern who I have in the C tier. His fight is not the most memorable by any means, but I think he's got a fair bit of personality in his design, even considering that. The way he looks is just very special. I love how he looks just like a balloon ready to burst, and then when you deflate him, he just looks genuinely depressed, like his dreams have been crushed just because he released the air from his sacs. Again, it's not the fight that you're going to remember forever, but the design, I think most people will remember for the rest of their time hunting monsters, and so that puts him at least one tier up from the bottom for me. Moving on, we've got Raidao in the S+ tier, the second monster in this tier, and I stand by it. Raidao is an incredibly well-designed monster, and it's very clear how much thought and effort went into making him interesting. And I'd say without story context, if you put Raidao and Arkveld next to each other and ask someone which one of them is the flagship, you'd get very conflicting responses. I mentioned it with Duna as well, but I really love the way that the Apex monsters are designed. I like the way that she harnessed the water around her instead of creating water herself, and Raidao is sort of the same thing, but with lightning. He doesn't necessarily produce it himself, so much he has organs that are purposely designed to harness the charge from the air during a thunderstorm, and then amplifying that into the lightning blast that he fires off. His entire body is essentially the barrel of a gun for lightning to funnel through as it turns into a strike that launches from his face. And it's just such a cool idea. His fight is fun, his design is incredible, and the only things that I have above him are monsters that I just have an extreme personal fondness for. Next up we have Nerscylla, who I have in the B tier. I don't think she's a bad fight by any means, and the best part of her return for me personally is the little spiderlings. I think those are wonderful, but Nerscylla herself is just sort of fine in my opinion. I respect her being the first spider monster, and I love that she wears a Gypsyros skin, and I enjoy the fact that she uses sleep status, as sleep is a pretty rare thing for monsters to actually use, but even her updated fight in Wilds feels pretty tame compared to most modern monster hunts. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing objectively, but for the way that I enjoy hunts, I just don't think that she really fits that. Next up, we've got Hirabami in the S tier, and this is one that I've held since the release of the game that I think most people think is weird. I think I definitely like Hirabami more than most people, because I have a special appreciation for lower tier monsters with big personalities. And while their fight isn't challenging by any means, I do think that it is memorable, even if just for the facts that you're fighting multiple of them at a time every time you fight one, and it's also a monster that's basically just floating on the wind. Sort of the same reason that I really adore Apex monsters in Wilds. Hirabami doesn't fly by flapping wings like most flying monsters do. They glide, they hover, they use the wind currents that are naturally happening around them to control their movements, and they are basically just harnessing the power of nature to stay afloat. And their general design, even outside of that, just the way they look visually, their weird taily mandible type things, it's just so weird in the best of ways, and the devs use this to then give them a pretty unique fight as well. After that, I've got a Jarikon up in the S tier, and he's gone up a fair bit for me compared to my original feelings on him when I first played the game, as he used to be in the same tier that I have Lullabarina and Nerscylla. What changed? Well, honestly, just time passing and me getting more used to him being around, which made me stop feeling like he felt inorganic. I used to feel like he was like an over-designed monster, like he gave me sort of vibes the same way that I thought about a lot of Frontier monsters originally, but I don't feel that same way about a Jarikon anymore. Past that, the 9-star tempered version of a Jarikon just made me really respect his moveset and his fight way more, as he is, at least from the ones that they've done so far, the monster with the biggest jump in difficulty between his normal version and the 9-star tempered version. And that's because the actual moveset he has, his animations, his mechanics, they have the ability to be challenging, and it's just that the monster itself normally has low enough damage that it doesn't feel that way. So I've gained a new appreciation for him after fighting that version of him. Following that, of course, new Udra Noodles the Flaming Octopus octopus, whatever you want to call it. I love this monster, and it's very clearly S++ tier for me. Cephalopods were mind-blowing to have happen in Wilds as someone who had absolutely no expectations of even a new monster type to begin with, so especially with it being a new monster type, but not just a new monster type, but one as wacky as cephalopods, made me so happy. New Udra specifically, however, even past that, is just an awesome creature in its own right. I love the idea of it catching on fire, basically just as a result of the pure heat of the basin during inclemency, and it being covered in a naturally flammable substance, and the way that it uses that to become even more dangerous. I love that you can individually cut off every tentacle, and I feel like this is just a love letter to the concept of octopi as creatures. Zhu Wu takes octopus and goes sort of crazy with it, but New Udra is like the exact image of a monstrous octopus, but then just twisted enough to fit into the specific monster hunter environment that it is. I love this monster to bits. After that, you first fight Guardian Deshagama, who I actually have in the B tier. I think he's a reasonable amount better than regular Deshagama, both visually speaking. I think he looks better, and just the extra interesting parts coming from the Wilk of it all. It makes me think of him much fonder than his standard version, even if the fight itself is mostly the same. Then we've got Guardian Rathalos in the A tier. I think he's really fun. I think the Rathalos moveset in Wilds is pretty decent, but I like these slight adjustments with Guardian, making him a little bit more physical than normal Rathalos, and I think he's visually more interesting than a regular Rathalos is too. And while we're breaking the order here, might as well say that I've got regular Rathalos in the B tier. I know this is like heresy for some people having a Rathalos this low, but Rathalos is the flagship of the entire series, and I do have massive respect for him in that regard, but when comparing monster to monster, design to design, fight to fight, everything in Wilds itself, he just falls a little bit short of the average for me compared to the other monsters. Moving on, Guardian Arkveld, the one that you only fight one time and only in low rank, and I have him in the A tier beside Guardian Rathalos, and this is mostly because I feel like I can only judge it as a story moment, really. You can't fight it again after the first one, and it's basically just a slightly more restricted version of the actual Arkveld moveset, and some slight visual differences with the glowing. Rather than being its own fully unique monster, it's basically a teaser for Arkveld in the future, and while I do really like Arkveld, I think that judging this version has to include those caveats, which is why I think A rank is as high as I can really justify for it, just based on design and story importance. Next up, a slightly bigger fish to fry here, we've got Jin Dahaad in the S tier. I absolutely love his sound design, and I think his fight is very, very solid the entire way through. For a more sort of scripted experience than most, I think they do a really good job of still having him feel like an actual fightable monster rather than just being on rails, and I love how he looks so tough and rigid and immobile if you just like look at him from a distance while he's stationary, but then he'll like coil around a pillar and climb up a wall or stuff like that. He is just so deceptively mobile. Visually speaking is where I have a bit of a conflict with him. I think he looks really interesting to me, and he's very neat, just not quite my personal preference of monster aesthetic, and so the S tier feels right like the right spot for me for him. After that one, we have Guardian Ebony Odogaron, who I have in the A tier. I really just love regular Odogaron from Monster Hunter World. I think he's an awesome monster that perfectly fit the feeling of an incredibly agile super predator that prowled through the Rotten Vale. It was basically just his map. Ebony Odogaron, though, I never quite liked as much, as it just didn't feel quite as ecologically matching as the original Odogaron did, and I can never get over the mismatched tail color that it had too. Guardian Ebony Odogaron makes the tail color stick out much less, so they solved that gripe that I had, and having it be a Guardian makes it sort of forcibly fit ecologically, because the entire point of Guardians is that they aren't natural. So feeling unnatural actually makes sense. I think the fight is fun. I enjoy the way that him being a Guardian augments his tiny dragon puffs by giving them something to chain into and explode with the Wilt crystals, and I think he's just a generally solid monster. Just not a personal favorite of mine in any individual category. Then we've got what I still think is my favorite monster in all of Wilds, Shu Wu. So of course he's going to be going in the S++ tier at the top. I still don't think that I'm saying his name correctly, but I love him nonetheless. I gushed about the general concept of cephalopods and how much I liked them earlier, and how surprising I found them too, but Shu Wu is just a bit next level. He takes the concept of an octopus and just seemingly mixes it with like a human assassin fighting style, almost like he learned how to fight by watching humans. He uses his hardening golden mucus to make these gorgeous weapons of various kinds on the end of his tentacles, and he has loads of unique animations depending on which ones he has. He has an incredibly cool pin attack and some of the coolest turf wars in the entire game. I love how creepy it is when he flips his big blue mouth open too, and visually as a whole he's just such an interesting creature. He's like a horror monster with just a twinge of silliness as well, which is just one of the kinds of aesthetics that I really adore, and I think he's just a perfect full package of a monster. Super unusual, super funky, simultaneously threatening and a little bit silly, and I've always said that if his attacks attacks did actual damage, he'd probably be one of the most satisfying fights in the endgame as well, because his moveset is very fun to play against. There's just no real risk when fighting him now because of his actual numbers. Moving on then, we've got Zoshia, who I have in the S+ tier, and this is just one that I think is objectively an incredible monster even outside of my own preferences, a fantastic spectacle of a final boss for the game, even better with the high rank version in Title Update 1, and a very fightable monster as well considering how big it is and how crazy its fight can get, which is something that Wilds has shown itself to be very good at doing, is overly large monsters that still feel like you're actually fighting something properly. The visuals of the creature are awe-inspiring, especially the way it sort of transforms from a formless angel into a chaotic demon by the end of the fight as you peel off its shell, and of course the fact that it essentially is the closest thing that we are likely to ever have to the equal dragon weapon, which is a long-standing Monster Hunter lore theory bit that was never truly confirmed properly, but Zoshia fits the mark perfectly as a creature created using pieces of various powerful elder dragons in an artificial way in the end. Next up, we've got Yonkut-Ku, who I have in the A tier. He's lovely, fantastic monster, great choice to return, and his fight is enjoyable in Wilds as well. The reason that he is where he is for me on this list is because I love his derpy personality, but I don't feel like his fight is all that cool or anything memorable really, so he doesn't go up any higher than this. The main moment that I remember for him is just the first time that you fight him, because it is like a giant group of Yonkut-Ku, but that's not something that you'll fight all that commonly as that. We've also got Gypsaros, who I have in the S tier. I think he's plainly better than Yonkut-Ku. I think he's very interesting in the way that he works. He's just as derpy. He plays dead, which is quite silly in itself, especially after the first time you see it, because you know what he's doing and you just sort of have to wait it out. And then the changes that they made to him in Wilds, with him having a properly stretchy rubbery tail that he swings around and slams with way more actively, he just feels way more alive to me than he ever did in his old versions. I love Wild Gypsaros. Not one of my top tier monsters in the game, but he's surprisingly pretty high up there. After that is Rathian, who I have in the C tier. No offense to Rathian, because I do enjoy hunting her. It's just sort of a paint by numbers kind of fight for me now at this point, because it's barely changed in a very long time, despite being a part of every Monster Hunter game. Design wise, I think that Rathian is fine, just not particularly special, and while I find her fight satisfying simply due to her being a big head weak spot punching bag that's fun to fight with hammer, I don't think that her fight is overall actually better than any of the monsters that I placed above her either, and I just don't value her personality all that much at this point compared to a lot of the monsters in Wilds. After that, we've got Blanganga, who I have in the A tier. Visually, he's just a silly monkey with a big bump on his head, and I like the bump, but most of him is just sort of fine, really, visually speaking. But his fight, however, got a significant improvement in Wilds. It feels way more active. He feels like he leans in a little bit more to the ice element part of him, and I love the way that he actively controls the little Blangos to fight with him too, and I just think that it's a fun encounter, which is shown even better with something like the event quest to fight 3 tempered Blangangas in the arena at the same time, each with their own little army of Blangos, and that was a super memorable experience. Following that is Gravios in the S tier. Gravios got such a massive improvement in Wilds compared to his older game versions for me. First up, visually, he looks actually just way more realistic, like he looks like he's properly made of rock instead of just rock-like scales, and his raw size feels way more imposing as well. His attacks look incredible, his beams are surprisingly pretty, and especially things like the way that the belly break looks in Wilds, just so brutal looking. He's an incredibly unique monster, and while before Wilds I didn't care too much for Gravios, he has become a monster that I enjoy much more because of this new version, and so I genuinely think that he is in the top half of the roster at the very least. Moving on, Guardian Vulgar Anjanath I have in the A tier. This was not at all a monster I expected to see returning in Wilds, and I was happy to see him come. The fight is essentially the same as Vulgar Anjanath was in Iceborne, with some very slight Guardian adjustments, and I always did like the original fight, and I would be listed higher if not for the fact that Guardian Vulgar Anjanath just has less vibrant colors than regular Vulgar Anjanath. Part of why I love Vulgar Anjanath was his bright orange tiger-striped head, and Guardian Vulgar does still technically have that, but the orange is really drowned out and muted, and the bright Guardian lines all over overpower the color so much that he just doesn't look as cool to me, so A tier feels right in this case. Next up, Gore Magala in the S+ tier. It's just an undeniably incredible monster design and fight. I have never been someone who considers Gore to be one of my personal top monsters, and that's just like a personal preference thing, but it's undeniable that he is one of the most unique creatures in the entire series, especially now that he has his own exclusive monster category called Demi Elder, and they even made his frenzy virus have actual story implications in Wilds and importance in high rank, rather than just like shoving him in for the sake of shoving him in, and I really appreciate that too. It makes him feel more meaningful. Put simply, while not something that I have a lot of personal affection towards, I think he is an objectively incredible monster to the point that it would feel wrong to me to have him any lower than S+ tier in this game. Then we've got proper full Arkveld, who is is also in the S+ tier. I love the arkveld fight. I think a lot of people got a bit sick of it because for a long time he was just the best option to farm for every endgame grind, but to me it is just an incredible monster. The story leading up to him is so good, and he is of course the flagship of the game, so he's uniquely positioned to have that kind of story behind him, but he also is visually awesome, like a Viking dragon looking extremely chaotic and wild, and the chain blades almost like representing the guardians being a slave to the ancient civilization's desires and will, and the full arkveld breaking free from those chains in a way. And most of the noises that he makes just sound like he's in an incredible amount of pain, but at the same time, sometimes you can just find him cleaning the dirt out of his chain blades, all tranquil like chilling out. Not to mention that I find his fight to be one of the most satisfying ones in Wilds, being full of telegraphs and learnable patterns to take advantage of. With that, then we move to the title update monsters, starting with Mizitsune, also in the S+ tier. Mizitsune has always been a monster I felt drawn to, not quite like my top 10 of all time, but not too far out of it either probably, but I love the colors of the monster, but of course it's someone who loves pink, that should be a given, but I also love it being essentially built around bubbles as its main weapon. It's just such a unique way to fight in Monster Hunter, and the way that it slides around the battlefield using the soapy bubbly liquid as a major part of its existence in every facet, then in Wilds the fight got more challenging and more satisfying. I love all the big impactful flip attacks. The visuals look even better in Wilds from Mizitsune 2, and then of course the whole soul seer mode as well after you damage its head enough, and having that be just a regular part of the base Mizitsune fight now makes the monster even cooler. Past that, there's the title update 2 monsters, and Legiacris I have in the S tier. I think he is absolutely gorgeous visually speaking, major visual upgrade to the last time that we had him around in a Monster Hunter game. His fight is solid, but not something that I really adore like some of the other ones that I place above him. And I think a really interesting part of this is his underwater phase. The first time you do it, it's really cool, it's very unique, it's an awesome scripted moment in an otherwise standard hunt experience, and it really helps to add to the feeling of him being an underwater monster, because otherwise you'd just be fighting him on land. The second time that you do this fight, the underwater sequence is a little bit less cool, so on and so forth, until eventually it just feels like it's an obstacle, like a chore that needs completing so you can get back to the Legiacris hunt, and I think that does make it a little bit muddier. It's not something that I'm penalizing him for on this list. His position is entirely based on his fight and the design. I just think that he doesn't quite breach the top tier even outside of this, but I think it's interesting that something that I originally thought to be a pure positive to the new Legiacris hunt is a thing that a fair number of people now view as a negative part of him months and months later. But I still think that he's incredible in Wilds. He's not too far off of the top tiers here. Next up is his title 2 compatriot Seregios, who I have in the S+. I absolutely adore the Seregios fight in Wilds, and I think it's actually the most satisfying fight, at least as someone who generally plays weapons with offsets or sword and shield, as Seregios is such a fun offsetting fight and a fun perfect guarding fight as well. Visually he has a pretty solid upgrade in Wilds despite also having returned in Sunbreak. He just looks even better in Wilds, and on top of having a great moveset, he's also got a lot of challenge in his higher difficulty fights, and 9-star tempered Seregios is just one of my favorite hunts in the game, with the only reason that he's not in the top tier for me being that he doesn't have that special it factor, something indescribable really, but he just isn't a cephalopod or a big pink poop monkey. He's too intentionally cool, whereas I love even just a sliver of wackiness in my favorite monsters. After that is the title update 3 monster edition, Omega, who I have finishing off the S tier. Omega's fight is unbelievably unique, very special, and I do love it even after hours and hours of pain through Savage Omega. That said, this is about as high a rank as I can offer for something purely because of an awesome fight. The only real issue with it for me is that this list is me ranking monsters, and while Omega is a fight in a Monster Hunter game, it's just not even close to something I really would feel correct calling a monster. Behemoth in World was at least a living creature, but this is just straight up like an alien robot, and it doesn't fit in Monster Hunter like even a small amount, not even in the game that has its story based around the idea of artificial monsters, because, well, those are artificial, they are still alive, they are like genetically modified, but they live, they breathe, they consume in their own way. I think it's an incredible crossover, don't get me wrong, and it's a very well-designed fight, but I can't have something I don't really view as a monster being higher tier than this on a monster tier list. Then finally we have Gogmazios added in title update 4, and I think he's right on the very edge between S+ and S++, but he's going to end up in S++ because it's my list and I can do what I want. I think visually he looks unbelievably good in Wilds. The sheer quality of him is immense. The way that the tar looks like it's actively dripping off of him, and then the reveal of his proper scales in the third phase in gaseous form, seeing his proper coloring underneath, the sort of like greenish hue that he has, and honestly just the fact that they completely reinvented the fight from the ground up while also making it still feel a little bit like the old one. They make it have actual sense behind it as well. Like the different phases of him are the result of the hunters that are fighting him. It's not just a thing that he does, it's a thing that we do to him, using fire element and fire weapons to actually soften him up. Even if you don't do it yourself, the support hunters are doing it, and that's how they logic behind it. And then eventually you reveal his dragon weaknesses underneath when he goes into gaseous form. And using this to add more mechanics to the fight itself is such a cool way of doing it. The first phase is just sort of alright really, but the second phase is fully iconic. Like, I think one of the coolest sections of hunting, just from the fact that you have this full roster of support hunters slapping him around, helping you out. The Elder Breaker pops off of his back, and the moment of actually firing that thing is so cool. And then the third phase, while the flying can be a bit irritating at times, it's still just absolutely awe-inspiring to watch something that big fly around an arena. And then the super attack with him heating up like all hell before it happens is also incredibly cool too. It's just a very, very cool showing for Gogmazios' great return. That does it for today, then everyone. Your full tier list of every large monster in Wilds and how they stack up against each other for me personally. In the grand scheme of things, I think Wilds has one of the best rosters of any base Monster Hunter game, possibly even the best overall if I'd really stop to think about it, but it's at minimum top 3 rosters for me, which I feel is quite interesting given that we have literally only the one Elder Dragon, which was added in the final title update. But it's just such a really tight roster, and even the monsters that I like the least, I still do enjoy existing and having them around in the game. I think they do add value. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and let me know which monsters you think deserve some more love in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.